If you watch this video to the end, your soul will be shaken. You've been warned. It was Christmas time in 1924. For those living in the rural town of Cave City, Kentucky, it seemed like a regular year. A year full of hope for a better future, and a Christmas full of joy and happiness. But fate had something else planned for Floyd Collins, a 29-year-old man who lived near the town. Floyd was known around town as a master hunter and an outdoorsman. He knew these parts like the back of his hand and could track anything he wanted through the wilderness. This skill would take him to places unknown to many, and one such place would lead to his demise. On December, Floyd made a life-changing discovery while hunting in the woods behind his home. He had seen this cave before, but today it looked like it was beckoning to him, so he decided to check it out. Floyd would never have guessed what lay ahead. This was no ordinary cave. It was Mammoth Cave, the longest cave in the world. Floyd didn't know that at the time. He only knew that it was big enough for him to crawl through. Excited by his discovery, Floyd thought he could make some money off of showing people around this cave. And when he went back to show his friend, he was shocked to find that the entrance had collapsed. Though determined, Floyd used his expertise in tracking animals to dig through the debris until he found an opening to get inside. When he finally emerged from the cave, he was greeted by the sun and the beautiful sight of a nearby lake, which he named Discovery Lake after his discovery. With his mind set on making money, Floyd went back into the cave and took measurements to chart the entire thing. He then wrote up a proposal and sent it to the local newspaper about his plan to build a tourist attraction at the site. And if all went well, he could earn a fortune by ferrying tourists through the cave. Soon enough, the paper got back to him with a positive response. The article drew quite a crowd to the location, and though it wasn't much at first, more and more people began coming to the cave every day to see what all the hype was about. Floyd didn't hesitate to capitalize on this opportunity. He began charging people to come see the cave, and as the crowds grew, so did his profits. He kept track of how much money he made in a notebook. By January, he had made almost $100. That was a lot of money back then. Floyd hired a couple of locals to help show tourists around the cave and keep it safe. He continued working hard, clearing out passages and building steps so tourists wouldn't have to crawl through the mud or walk over slippery rocks. He also built wooden walkways in some areas to make traversing the cave easier. But his biggest project was at the entrance. He was determined to have a grand entrance to welcome guests. While working on the entrance one day, Floyd stumbled upon another large opening. He explored this area and found that it led to a huge chamber with stalactites hanging from its ceiling. He named it the Grand Avenue. The tourists loved it and flocked to see it. Floyd saw this as a chance to expand his business. He brought in surveyors to measure the whole cave, which totaled to be about 6 miles long. He then employed miners to help carve out paths and widen them so tourists could walk through comfortably. They discovered many magnificent features like stalagmites and stalactites. So Floyd added viewing platforms so guests could marvel at these natural wonders. As the cave became more popular, the number of visitors increased. They came from neighboring towns and eventually from all over the United States. Floyd was making a lot of money now, and he was on top of the world. But just as suddenly as he had become rich, his fortune turned upside down. On January, Floyd was guiding a group of tourists through the cave when he slipped and fell. He tried to catch himself, but he hit his head on a rock and blacked out. No one witnessed the accident except Floyd, who couldn't remember it because he had lost consciousness. When he woke up, he found himself lying on the ground with a throbbing pain in his head. Though confused, he stood up and tried to shake off the pain. But when he tried to continue leading the tour, he realized he couldn't remember where they were. Panicked, he told the tourists to wait there while he figured out where he was. When he returned, the tourists were gone, and he was alone in the dark cave. Floyd knew he was in trouble. He tried to remember how he got there, but he couldn't recall anything. In a panic, he started walking in the direction he thought the entrance was. But after walking for what felt like hours, he realized he had no idea where he was. When he finally stopped to catch his breath, he noticed that there was a small opening in the wall. He crawled through and found a small pocket of air. And in that moment, Floyd realized that he was trapped. At this point, Floyd did the smart thing. He rationed out the little food he had and tried to conserve his energy. He drank water from the lake he had discovered when he first entered the cave and slept whenever he could to save his strength. When he was sure he wouldn't die from hunger or exhaustion, Floyd began calling out for help, but there was no one there to hear him. After a few days of this, he began writing messages on pieces of paper and sliding them under the rocks to signal for help. But no one ever came. Days turned into weeks, and Floyd's hope began to dwindle. Then one day, he heard voices outside the cave. He shouted as loud as he could, but the voices faded away without hearing him. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Floyd became weaker and weaker. His body was battered and torn from crawling through the cave. He was losing weight, and his hair and beard grew long and unkempt. He slept most of the time, and when he was awake, he would pace the small space in front of the opening in the wall, hoping that someone would find him. After 23 long days, Floyd's sister decided to visit the cave to see if he was still there. She hadn't heard from him in a while and was worried. When she arrived, she called out for him, but there was no answer. She then checked the opening in the wall and saw the note Floyd had left behind. She called for help, and soon a search party had gathered around the cave. They tried digging him out, but the opening was too small for them to reach him. Soon, the whole town had gathered around the cave, and since no one could get inside, they began digging a tunnel to reach Floyd. But this was slow, painstaking work. Meanwhile, Floyd's condition worsened. He developed pneumonia and was too weak to move. Even if the townspeople had reached him in time, he wouldn't have survived. Soon, everyone was worried that the cave might collapse before they could rescue him, so they worked day and night to dig him out. It was tough work, but they were determined to succeed. And finally, after 17 long days, they reached Floyd. He had passed away during the night. His body was taken out of the cave and buried in the town cemetery. After Floyd's death, people stopped visiting the cave. But in 1943, it was reopened to the public. Today, Mammoth Cave is the longest cave in the world and the 7th most popular tourist destination in Kentucky, welcoming over 5 million visitors each year. But the story of Floyd Collins continues to send shivers down people's spines. If you want to hear more spine-chilling stories, stay tuned.